Welcome to a journey back in time, to the bustling, smoky, and surprisingly clever world of medieval castle kitchens. Today, we're diving deep into how castle kitchens kept their food fresh long before electricity or modern refrigeration. In medieval castles, food was a precious commodity, and wasting could mean starvation during harsh winters or sieges. So, they had to get creative. The first trick up their sleeve? Building larders and butteries. These were specialized cool rooms, often located underground or in the thickest stone parts of the castle. Thick walls, tiny windows, and shady positioning helped maintain lower temperatures inside, perfect for storing perishable items like dairy, fruit, and even some cooked foods. Another major weapon in their food preservation arsenal was salting. Meat and fish were heavily salted and packed into barrels to remove moisture, which bacteria need to grow. In fact, salt was so crucial that it was sometimes called white gold. Curing with salt not only preserved food for months, but also added flavor, which many people at the time came to enjoy. Castles often had their own ice houses too. During the winter, workers collected snow and ice, packing it tightly into underground chambers insulated with straw and sawdust. This frozen treasure could last well into summer, allowing the storage of more sensitive foods like certain meats or rare fruits for longer periods. Drying was another favorite technique. Herbs, fruits, fish, and even some meats were carefully hung up in warm, well-ventilated areas to slowly dry out. Once dried, these foods could last for months without spoiling. Imagine walking into a castle kitchen and seeing rows of sausages, herbs, and strips of fish dangling from beams overhead. It would have been quite a sight. Pickling was also widely used. Vegetables, fruits, and even eggs were submerged in vinegar or brine, creating an acidic environment where harmful bacteria couldn't survive. Jars of pickled onions, cucumbers, and other delights lined the shelves of many a castle pantry. So even without a refrigerator, medieval kitchens had an entire toolkit of smart, natural methods for keeping food safe. And trust me, these methods weren't just about survival. They also added rich, complex flavors that became deeply rooted in medieval cuisine. Daily strategies and kitchen design for freshness. Now that we've covered storage methods, let's zoom in on the daily kitchen life and design tricks that kept food as fresh as possible. Castle kitchens were designed to maximize food preservation through clever architecture. Thick stone walls acted like natural insulators, keeping the heat of cooking fires from spoiling the food stores nearby. Kitchens were often located away from the main castle halls, not just to avoid fire hazards, but also to isolate the smells and heat that could speed up food decay. Running water was a luxury in many castles, but for those that had it, it played a big role in preserving freshness. Some castles diverted nearby streams through their kitchens or storage areas. The cool, flowing water helped keep dairy and meat products chilled longer. In smaller castles, a deep stone sink known as a salting trough might be kept filled with fresh, cold water for chilling certain foods temporarily. Food preparation schedules were also built around freshness. Cooks often prepared meals with the most perishable ingredients early in the day, while heartier foods that could stand a few extra hours at room temperature was saved for later. Bread, for instance, might be baked daily or every few days in huge batches and stored in the coolest, driest part of the kitchen. Herbs and spices weren't just used for flavor. They helped preserve food too. For example, mustard, vinegar, and pepper were key to preserving cooked dishes and sauces for a bit longer than they would otherwise last. Animals were often kept close to the castle kitchens. Live chickens, rabbits, goats, ensuring that meat could be prepared fresh when needed. Instead of risking spoilage, the castle kitchens often relied on the fresh kill approach for protein. It sounds rough, but in an age without refrigeration, it made perfect sense. Butter and cheese production were daily or weekly routines in many castle kitchens. By quickly converting milk into longer-lasting forms like cheese or butter, medieval cooks reduced the risk of spoilage. Ultimately, castle kitchens were ecosystems of preservation, blending architecture, water systems, daily schedules, and a deep understanding of nature's rhythms to keep food fresh and bellies full. Long-term storage and seed survival. In times of siege, When castles could be surrounded for months with no way to resupply, the need to keep food fresh and edible became even more critical. Careful planning and centuries of accumulated knowledge ensured survival in the harshest conditions. Here's how they managed it. Long-term food supplies were meticulously stockpiled in huge storage rooms known as granaries and cellars. These rooms were often built deep within the castle's most secure areas, shielded from attackers and the elements. Grains like wheat, barley, rye, and oats were kept dry and safe from pests, sometimes stored in large clay jars, oak barrels, or woven baskets elevated off the ground on wooden platforms. Keeping them dry was absolutely essential. Even a little dampness could cause mold to spread rapidly, spoiling entire harvests. In some castles, guards were even assigned to monitor food stores, protecting them against rats and insects. Meat preservation was taken to the next level during siege preparations. Massive quantities of beef, pork, venison, and fish were salted or smoked, then packed tightly into barrels. Salting pulled out moisture, while smoking added another layer of defense. The smoke contained antimicrobial compounds that slowed spoilage and kept away insects. Smokehouses were often running continuously in the months leading up to an expected siege, filling the air with the scent of curing meat. Dried legumes like peas, lentils, and beans were also key siege foods. These humble ingredients were incredibly durable, rich in protein, and easy to store. When boiled into thick, hearty stews with a handful of preserved herbs or salted meats, they became essential sustenance capable of feeding hundreds. Honey served not only as a sweetener but also as one of nature's most effective preservatives. It was used to coat fruits, pastries, and even cook meat to extend their shelf lives. Fun fact: archaeologists have found pots of ancient honey buried in Egyptian tombs that remain perfectly edible thousands of years later. In castles, honey was often stored in sealed clay pots, ready to be used as both food and medicine. Wine, ale, and vinegar played multiple roles. Beyond being safe drinks, especially when water supplies were contaminated, these liquids were key preservation tools. Wine and vinegar were used to pickle fruits, vegetables, and meats, while ale provided critical calories. Pickled food could survive for months in tightly sealed casks, and the slight acidity of wine and vinegar kept bacteria at bay. Fat was another clever preservation tool. After cooking, meat could be sealed beneath a thick layer of its own rendered fat, a method known as confit. Without air exposure, bacteria couldn't reach the meat, allowing it to stay fresh for weeks or even months. Sometimes pots of confit were buried underground in cooler areas to prolong their longevity even further. Finally, strict rationing was enforced immediately once a siege began. Cooks, stewards, and the lord of the castle carefully calculated daily allowances based on expected siege length and available supplies. Meals were made simpler and smaller. Fresh food were used first, while preserved good was saved for the later, tougher days. Special consideration was given to feeding the garrison of soldiers defending the walls, ensuring they remained strong for battle. Castle kitchens, far from being chaotic messes, were marvels of early food science, sustainability, and ingenuity. Their preservation techniques, combining salting, smoking, drying, pickling, sealing, and rationing, not only kept food fresh without modern technology, but also shaped culinary traditions that still influence kitchens today.